a bit of an intro for myself. Hello, my name is Max. I use any pronouns. I am an artist and an educator with the Queer and Trans Health Collective, uh, which is located here on Treaty 6 territory in Emiskwaciwâskahikan, otherwise known as Edmonton, Alberta. And, I just wanted to start out our evening by offering a little bit of thanks to the folks who stewarded the lands that we, exist on, even if we're meeting in a digital space. I think there's a lot that we can learn in our artistic and really any endeavors from the land and folks who meaningfully have taken care of it for time immemorial. So I just wanted to start out with that sort of intention that, we are here because of the work of many, 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 many people. And so with that, I'm going to be very straightforward. This is a very casual workshop, if you haven't been able to tell that already. Speaking for myself, I am also a university student, so it's final season. I know that for a lot of you, it's probably been a busy day, if not close to a busy week at this point, with the whole convention going down. So really, this is just kind of like a chill creative space with a little bit of informative context. And so with that, I'll start with a few slides just talking about what are zines? Where do zines come from? Why do we like zines? And after that, we'll actually move into more of a demonstration on how to make zines in a couple of ways. And then after that, it's going to be a very chill time where we can just create together. If anyone wants to chat or ask questions, the space will be open to do so. If no one has questions, maybe I can figure out how to play a little bit of music for us to listen to while we make stuff together. Who's to say? We'll figure it out when we get there. What I will say in the meantime, though, is that I am going to be sharing my screen with my slides. So I will not necessarily be able to see the chat. So I apologize if I miss any questions that pop up while I'm doing the slides, but feel free to leave them there and I can answer them when I'm wrapped. Again, the slideshow itself is not very long. So again, if anything comes up, feel free to leave it there. I'll answer it after before we get into the demo. So if that sounds good, I'm going to share my screen and get to talking. Well, continuing to talk, rather. So. Alrighty, that seems to be working. So I will now put it into presentation mode, and I'm going to hope that it's showing up that way for you as well. Since again, can't really see the chat. So who's to say? So to start out, what is a zine? Zines are typically handmade, self-published little booklets. The word zine itself is short for magazine. And, if that description sounds vague, it kind of is, because zines can be a lot of different things and feature a lot of different content and really be made about any subject that you might want it to be about. I have a variety of samples that I'll show you later, but it ranges anything from people's artwork to storytelling to political content, anything like that can be in a zine. And so with this sort of handmade nature of zines, it can really be made in any sort of way. You'll have folks who write their own content, who draw, paint, create however way, Or you'll also have folks who will borrow images and text in a sort of collage like fashion. Either way, no matter what you're making, as long as it's like kind of a little book, it's probably a zine. And for the most part, because these are like self-published and self-made little booklets, they're usually distributed through informal channels, although this has been getting better over the past few years. I've seen multiple libraries start to have zine collections, and, you know, with more sort of stores popping up where like multiple artists can come in to like sell like smaller works, it's becoming a little more common practice to get zines in your kind of day-to-day life. But broadly speaking, you know, zines most commonly exist through like zine fairs, community events like art markets. You can even get them by mail, online, anything like this. And so, where do zines come from? This is a very, very brief history of zines and zine culture, which I will also flag is primarily based in like very much like a North American context slash like Western context. And I want to be like very honest about that. Um, but I'm hoping to like dig into this a little bit more because I've always found myself a little more curious of like how zines have evolved in other places outside of North America. But again, as a student, I don't always have the time to research these things beyond the initial research put into these presentations. So with that context in mind, a little bit of zine history. Broadly speaking, human beings are like very opinionated creatures, and we love to just share our ideas in whatever ways possible. So even in the time pre-zine culture, we're kind of always finding reasons and like platforms for us to share our ideas with other people, whether that is creating like these sort of communal contexts where we can all talk to each other, or like ultimately the creation of the printing press being like one of those big kickoff points where we can create multiple copies of something and have it shared more easily rather than having like 5 handwritten copies of something and just kind of hoping for the best. So with that, I think it's really interesting to think that like as long as kind of human print culture has existed, there's at least like the roots of what zine culture comes from within that. However, if we're like actually thinking about zine culture as it exists in our present and like what is relevant to our kind of experience, zine culture seems to really have begun in sci-fi fan culture in the 1930s, kind of out of a place where you have science fiction fans who are not super happy with the stories that are being like given to them through more mainstream science fiction like magazines and books, because they seem a little too upbeat for the Great Depression era. Folks were really not wanting a sort of like utopian vision during the Great Depression. I wonder why. And so as a result, this spurs on this trend of fans starting to write their own stories and exchanging these smaller fanzines with one another through the mail. And we even see authors like Octavia Butler kind of coming up through scenes similar to this. So it is like in its own right a very legitimized form of writing. And as I kind of like move past this section of time, which I've labeled from 1930s to the 1960s, it's important to recognize that like this storytelling zine culture still exists. Just everything I'm continuing on with past this point is more just like adding on layers to like how we understand zines and zine culture today, and like how it's kind of shaped into this sort of conglomerate experience rather than like one era replacing the next. And so in the 1970s, we see kind of the emergence of countercultural movements, particularly the punk movement, adopting and really getting into zine creation due to cheaper access to photocopy machines, because, you know, the cheaper that you can like make these copies, especially for folks who are in these subculture movements, the more like enticing it is to do it. You know what I mean? I'd say that's even the same case for me now as a visual artist. If I can share something for less expensive than it needs to be, I would love to do it that way. It's more economical for me personally. And so, in this kind of rise of the punk zine, we see multiple different genres, even like out of that community, whether it's like zines that are devoted to different bands or some entering that more politically oriented realm, especially with a movement like punk being very inherently political in its intentions. And so, with that, as we move into the 80s and 90s, we see zines continue to diversify along with this music movement, particularly under the, like in reaction to the Reagan administration in the United States, in both the sort of music and lyrical content of these bands, and therefore the zine content um, of the creators. And so, kind of in this time, again, we see continued sort of political critiques of, you know, current state of affairs, but then we also see an increasing like rise in feminist zines coming out of the punk subculture, like particularly Riot Girl, which comes as a reaction and response to sexism in the punk scene. And even from within both the punk scene at large and within feminist movement within the punk scene, we see zine responses that start to address things like racism and homophobia and transphobia, also found within the punk scene, even though it's supposedly this very like countercultural movement that should be, you know, supporting folks from all backgrounds and experiences, especially if we're thinking about like an analysis of power. But the zines kind of say otherwise, you know, and it's a really interesting sort of reflection on like what these cultures look like and how all these different voices are coming from a sort of similar root place. And so in that, we can start to think about like zines as they relate to like the queer and trans community. This is true for any movements, but especially like countercultural movements, queer and trans people have always been part of these movements since they began, in the same sense that queer and trans people have always existed in one way or another over time. And so we can see a lot of examples of zines that are coming out from like queer and trans people talking about their experiences and issues of the time that they grew up in. Again, particularly rising during this era in the 80s and 90s, not only because of the sort of political proliferation and diversification in punk zines, but also like in direct response to the AIDS epidemic. And so you see like zines coming out from organizations like ACT UP that are specifically acting as a resource where mainstream sources are not offering that information, particularly as it relates to like safe sex and understanding AIDS in the like to the degree that they can in the start of the epidemic. And so it's kind of that lineage that still follows through a lot of like queer and trans zines today, in that although not like the case for every single queer or trans like zine artist, many of them use zines as a means to talk about subjects related to like queer and trans identity that are not found in mainstream channels. So an example of that can be seen on screen through translations. This is a zine that my workplace, the Queer and Trans Health Collective, made in 2020, 2021-ish. And it's a resource about trans people navigating hormone replacement therapy access in Alberta, though not from like the perspective of like what the biological changes to one's body are, but rather like considering the emotional experience of starting hormones and what sort of decisions go into making that choice for oneself, which is kind of an empty spot in how trans people are expected to think about the hormonal aspects of their transition, right? So I think it's a very interesting sort of narrative that was able to be brought forward by that project, which is why I want to share it. And so that kind of brings us to zines today. Again, queer and trans people are still very much using zines to share information about their identities and experiences and creating that sort of pathway for other people who are like queer and trans to explore their own identity outside of these sort of like mainstream channels. But of course, in our sort of like internet age, that becomes even easier than ever before, in that now it's not just a matter of like people are creating these zine resources that we can like share and learn from, but now we can find these things online. Folks have shared like completely digital zines, or you can see a number of zine archives on the screen right now. And even beyond that, you can buy like physical zines on like Etsy now, or like find them through creators on social media. So in this, like we see zine culture growing even further beyond what was already a medium meant for like accessibility and sharing, just growing even further with the online sphere. And so I think it's very interesting for us to now be like part of that growth in an active way in what we choose to create and what we choose to share, and whether or not we choose to share that online. So yeah, I would say that's pretty much it for the main part of my presentation. And so basically we're kind of moving into the creating zine portion of the evening. So it's at this point that I let you all know that you may need some materials, but there are digital alternatives that can be done. So we'll probably take like a little pause in case folks do need to go get materials, just to be very clear. So like don't feel like super rushed. We have plenty of time. And so the two main things you're going to need for the zine style I'm going to show you are like a piece of paper. This is just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. If you don't have white paper, construction paper is fine. Lined paper is fine. Whatever paper you have around is fine. Just for the thing I'm showing, preferably rectangular, but if you don't have that, we will find another way. The thing about zines, if I've not made this clear enough already, is that it's an incredibly versatile medium, and pretty much anything can be a zine if you just believe it. So we'll work with whatever paper you have, if you have paper at all. And so the other thing that you'll probably need is something to cut with. I have scissors, but you can also use like an X-Acto or mat knife or something if you feel safe using that. Do what is doable for you. You know what I mean? And those are like kind of the base things we need to make the actual structure of the zine. But then besides that, you know, it's just whatever you would want to like use to decorate or fill a zine with. So off screen, I can't lift it up. It's a big container. I have markers and like crayons and that kind of stuff. But even if you just have like a pen or a pencil, that is fine. And for folks who are like not super artistically comfortable, which like I get, we all have our not super creative days. Um, Even if you have like a couple like magazines lying around, you can always like cut out images and like text from it. It's very, again, very versatile to like whatever you need this to be. um, and even to the point where like if you don't have any of those materials, we can just do something online pretty much. My personal kind of go-to for zine making online is Canva, because it's free and it already has like kind of a zine layout thing you can use, as well as you know, different fonts and like photos and that kind of stuff. But even if you don't want to use Canva, like you could honestly just open up like a Word document and start putting like text and images into it. You know, like there's a lot of, again, there's so many different things you can do. I just want to leave the space open to like whatever is good for y'all at this point in the in the convention, really. And so would we say that like, I don't know how many folks actually need to go get stuff, so I can offer like maybe until like 7:25, 7:30, if anyone needs to go grab materials. If you can confirm that in the chat, that'd be cool. But also, if no one needs materials, then I can just dive into it. Let me know. While you think about that, I'm gonna have a drink of water. Okay, perfect. If folks do not see, um, Renee has opened a Jamboard for us, so that's amazing. And no problem if you don't have, if you have materials but don't know what you're doing. That is almost entirely what I'm here for. We will figure it out together. But yeah, we will give folks, I guess at this point, I'll just say like 5-ish minutes if folks just need to like grab stuff. So we'll take a few. I guess that would get us between like 7:28, 7:30. And yes, as Renee just said, you're welcome to join me on stage here on our digital stage. Because at some point I can almost like, at the very least, you'll be looking at me making the zine, but I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes the zine process gets confusing when done online. So there's a high chance you may need to show me what you're doing, and I will try to walk you through it verbally. So I'll just give that as a heads up, because, you know, sometimes making, like, we're making a little booklet like this, it can be tough. But yeah, we will hang out just kind of casually for a little bit until 7:28, 7:30-ish. I'll do like a slow restart just in case folks want to grab materials. So yeah.
I'm not going to leave you hanging by yourself. I'm going to come join you. How you doing?
I appreciate it. I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I was like trying to find a zine page I did digitally to share, but I'm having a hard time finding where I put things. I'll build it. Hey, Ed.
Hey, how do I do this? What do you want me to do? Like cut this stuff up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Build a
paper. I got some stuff.
Yeah. Yours is gonna be like a cool collage piece, is what I figure.
Nice.
So that'll be pretty rad. But yeah, it really is always the case when you're trying to look for like an example of something you already did, and then it just goes missing somewhere. And so
Why didn't we save it as this? Maybe at the time we didn't have it named that or something. I don't know.
yeah,
I got
know.
it.
It's like my gym outfit. I wear this to go to the gym. Super cozy.
Yeah, I was about to
It's
say
got
I was
my pump cover, you know. I like work out, and then after I'm all swole, I take it off, and then, you know.
yeah, it's perfect to be wearing a bunch of fleece while working out.
No,
Very
it keeps
comforting.
you warm. It keeps you warm, and then like you sweat a lot, and then after, yeah, you take it off, and then you're ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, this gem.
Okay. I'm just curious though, like what do you is there any modern zines that are like super famous that like people would know about?
Mm,
I never
well,
even heard of the term zine.
I think zines in themselves kind of tend to like fly a little below the radar for a lot of folks simply because they are like smaller and more independently produced. So
Mhm.
like sometimes you'll run across them if you go to like smaller bookstores. Like I know in Edmonton you have places like Glass Bookshop that might have them, or even places like the Quilt Bag, which is like an artist consignment store that can have them. Um,
It's
but
kind
yeah,
of like a mixed media art, right?
yeah, it can be. Yeah, one of the zines I'd think of that like might be familiar to again other folks in Edmonton is Hungry Zine. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, Morgan's right that the tattoo shop Pansy Poke on White Ave has a little zine vending machine as well.
Vending.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, it's very cute. But yeah, Hungry Zine is like they do like a call for submissions based on like different themes. This one is on the theme of like preserve, and as implied by the title, it's food themed to some degree for each time. And so you'll get like a mix of like some recipes, some visual artwork, some like stories and like poems kind of related to those themes. I think they've released like at least like 7 or 8 of them now. I don't keep the best track necessarily, but yeah, this is one of the more popular ones that I'd say exists in Edmonton. But I'm not sure if there's really any that are on like a global scale where someone would know. Wait, like this zine.
Hungry one looks really cool. I really like food too, so maybe like
Yeah, it not always the best one to read on an empty stomach, especially when it's like a very recipe heavy version. So
good way to like rouse your appetite.
yeah. Okay. I think we it's almost about time gave for folks to come back. So maybe it's zine making time. Again, I will be honest. So this is just like a little mini zine. It's made with like one sheet of paper, and it's what we're gonna try make together today.
Okay.
But I do understand that like even when I do this in person, sometimes the last couple steps get confusing. So if it feels confusing, that's because it often is, and don't feel bad about it.
I'll take the time to observe the.
Yeah. I will say the first couple steps, not too bad, not too intimidating. It's a lot of folding. So, for all of your benefit, I've drawn some lines on my paper so you can actually see what I'm doing, hopefully on the camera. But even then, I'll try narrate to the best of my ability what it is I'm actually doing. So, first we're gonna fold along this blue line I've done here. You might consider it like lengthwise of the paper, or I've heard that referred to as like hot dog style. So just a nice hot dog style fold so that you have like a slightly thinner piece of paper.
Sorry.
Oh. No problem. Then you're gonna immediately undo that fold after you've creased it. You can kind of tell that like what we're going to be doing is marking out different sort of like lines to figure out how it all comes together later on. So a bit of folding and unfolding will ensue. So now we're going to fold along it this way. So along the sort of width of it instead. And once again, score it. Sometimes referred to as hamburger style. Trying to use helpful terminology. And then we're going to actually fold it in half one more time this way so that you get a very sort of thin piece here. So we'll see. Again, if anyone needs me to like pedal back or anything, you can let me know.
Oh my God, Max, this is my jam. I love origami. And we're two peas in a pod, Max. Take a look. Take a look at my desk.
Oh my gosh. We have the self-healing mat.
Oh yeah,
incredible.
We got this. We're two peas in a pod. Let's do this.
Honestly, and the fun thing is my hoodie is sitting like right here. So if I wasn't
so
warm,
right there. Yeah, I got one.
If I wasn't so warm, we'd be completely on the same page right now. So anyways, now we're back to our like main sheet of paper. Okay. I meant to just say unfold it one time from hamburger. That's my mistake. So basically you have your widthwise hamburger folds or whatever. This is where the complication begins. So, and it's also where the scissors come into play. So this side is where our fold is, and this side is where the open end is. All we want to do is we're going to take the scissors and cut basically from the folded edge one sort of segment in, if that makes sense. So I will do it on mine, and then hopefully that will help illustrate. So the fold is still here. I've put my cut down the middle, and then my open side is still intact over here. Yes, I'm seeing some successful cuts, so this is promising. Okay. Amazing. Now, okay. This is the part that I haven't fully figured out how is best to explain online. So I'm gonna show it the best with my hands, and hopefully we all figure it out together. So with our unfolded piece of paper, you're gonna grab the two middle folds and basically just like pull them apart. And then it should kind of like come down to meet itself. And then everything folds sideways into a book. You see how that's not the best thing to try explain, not in person.
I did it the wrong way. I did it vertically. I didn't do it horizontally. I need a new piece of paper.
Do it one more time.
Okay.
Exactly how you did it the last time.
Okay. So we're gonna we have our full sheet of paper. I grab the middle seam on like either side of our thing, and then I just kind of pull it outwards. And then I think a good way to like slow it down is that it kind of turns into a star as you pull it apart. And then you can just fold all of it into one direction, and that'll be your book.
So this one, okay.
I see Morgan has a book. This is great news.
Just Renee.
Listen, this also, again, see, you have a book. This is wonderful. Again, this is, I didn't get it when I did this the first time, so I do not blame anyone who may or may not be confused right now. Yes, Nexi has a book. Look, we have so many books. This is going excellently. Oh, and you're almost there, Edward.
Sorry, I folded it the other way. It's like this, right?
Yes, and then you can just fold all the pages to one side, and then you'll have like a little spine of your book, and then your pages. Yay! Everyone who's on camera has successfully made a mini zine. This is a big win for everyone. Though, I will say, for anyone, whether you're on screen or not, if that method didn't work, here's an equally valid method to make a zine. You have your piece of paper, you fold it in half, there's your zine. It can literally just be a single page. It's super up to you, whatever actually like works best for whether this technique is like really hard for you, and or maybe you want a bigger zine than this. You know, this is like double the size. And you can always add more pages to this one by just kind of putting them into the spine. So yeah, with that, we now have an idea of how we can actually like make a zine. And so we can kind of move into like just filling it out however anyone wants to. So again, if you want to like draw or write, that's super an option. If you are someone who prefers to like collage, then magazines, if you have them, are super useful. But if anyone needs some inspiration, I do have some example zines we can look at. Yeah. Or I can also just give some prompts that might spark inspiration. Actually, I will show a few sample zines, mostly because I like to show off parts of my zine collection. Because I have a variety. I've been collecting them from like primarily like other artists I know. But even in just like the work related zines I've collected over the years are also quite fun to look at, I think. So I will say this also becomes sort of a platform for me sharing a lot of my friends' work, and I'll be very honest about that. This is kind of a bit of nepotism on my part. But you know, sometimes that's how it goes. I will start by talking a bit about my friend Dana Belcourt, who was based in Edmonton for a long time, but now lives in Vancouver and is one of the most like well-seasoned zine artists I've ever met. Like, has just a small like series of zines on all like different topics and things. And so I thought I'd pull out a few of their like kind of unique ones that like again show a lot of the options that you can go with zines. This is one titled Book One, and they took an old book and just did like the sort of blackout poetry in it. So they just chose whatever words they want to keep. You might not be able to read it on screen, unfortunately, but you know, just gave them like a lot of flexibility. Again, it's not necessarily the pressure of like writing something from scratch. It's like, you know, playing with some books that you have lying around and are not using anyway to like tell whatever story or like write whatever poem you want to write. In a similar sort of vein, this one is called Your iCloud Storage is Full. And it's just random notes that Dana had left on their phone. So for example, like one of them is like a lovely poem, but then another one is just a list of Pokemon that they like and wanted to share. And a grocery list with a single item which just says raisins. So again, you can just, it's a nice sort of like peek into like what their life is like and like what they're thinking about, even though it's not necessarily like they drew something or wrote something specifically for this scene. And then they have one that's also just like Polaroids. So photos of their friends and of the city. Again, you could really just make a zine out of whatever kind of stuff you want to. And I think Dana's work is like a really good example of that. That being said, I do need to also say Dana is also a very good visual artist. This is not out of their lack of ability to do visual art. They just have a lot of different sort of creative pathways in their life. Another artist who, this one is a little more artistic and it's a storytelling zine. It's by a friend of mine named Paxi Parado. And this is a story that I believe they wrote about their father. They did digital illustrations and wrote this story. And, you know, it's just a cute little zine. There's lots of different ways to like, you know, make art and share. So I want to share this one as well. And for another sort of collage zine, this one is by my friend Callum McKenzie, and it's called Men Do Cry, and it is entirely just a collage zine that they did a digital scan. So this is printed on some very sort of fancy paper. But yeah, just extracts from like magazines and stuff, and some screen caps of like the Batman animated cartoon, it looks like, actually. And then some pictures of like men crying. So again, I use all these examples because I think they're like really helpful to show that, again, if you're not a writer or not a visual artist, you can still make like a lot of interesting things, even though these are all from visual artists, to be fair. But there's a lot of different ways that we can all explore this sort of like creative space. And I think we all have the creative potential within us. And let's see. I think I'll share one more. This is when like someone makes like a really nice like formal zine. This one is technically from Athabasca University. It was coordinated by my friend Juliana Caneda when they were working there as part of the there was like a trans research project related to experiences during COVID-19. And so they helped coordinate this zine project where folks shared like snippets of their stories about like how they're feeling during that time, and then had illustrations to go along with it. And you can tell that this one's more like a bound book, but it kind of started as a zine. So yeah, I just wanted to show that there's also like the potential for like zines to become something like very big and cool. And, you know, be very powerful for a lot of people to like share their voices and experiences. But yeah, those are like the few kind of samples of different zines that I could think to share. Oh, but I guess I just realized I should also like, sometimes zines are just like very informative. This is called Settler Sexuality. It is by their username is K Info Shop, so like KE Info Shop. And this one is honestly like just an essay in a zine, and that's also cool if you're just wanting to share information with like no, not that there isn't a creative touch to like writing an essay, but like very different. So, oh, and thank you for sharing a zine in the chat here. yeah, everyone check this out because it's stylistically like really interesting, and I think it looks very cool. It's kind of bringing like a lot of those different elements together with the sort of like collagey stuff and like the informative stuff. Like, yeah, this is a very great example. Thank you so much for sharing that. But yeah, I guess at this point, like if anyone has questions, feel free to ask. Because otherwise we can just move into like chill zine making time. If anyone needs like a prompt to think about, I thought, we'll end the day on a light note, like things that bring you joy could be like a zine theme, or even just like as we draw to the end of December, kind of some annual reflections on how you're feeling. Just some kind of chill themes to work with for the evening if anyone would like. Obviously no obligation, just like if you need something to get going. I cannot guarantee that the zine I put together will be on either of those themes, admittedly, but we'll see what I find. I'm going more the collage route myself, so yeah.